안녕하세요.
At the grand headquarters of Kang Enterprises, the hallways were cold and impeccably organized, reflecting the rigid nature of the ruthless CEO, Kang Ji-hoon. Known for his sharp mind and icy heart, he was feared and respected in equal measure. His world revolved around contracts, meetings, and an arranged marriage that his family insisted he accept. However, everything changed in an instant, in a completely unexpected way. Yoon Hana, a dedicated employee from the design department, hurried through the corridors, balancing a stack of folders and a cup of coffee. Time seemed to conspire against her, and before she could react, she collided directly with someone. The impact was enough to spill the hot coffee all over Ji-hoon's pristine shirt. Silence immediately filled the hallway. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" Ji-hoon's cold voice made Hana shiver. Her eyes widened as she immediately recognized the man standing before her. Panic surged down her spine. The CEO himself. With trembling hands, she tried to wipe the stain from his shirt, only making the situation worse. "I'm sorry. I didn't see. I was in a hurry," Hana stammered, lowering her head. Ji-hoon sighed, adjusting his tie and staring at her with a sharp gaze. He was about to scold her severely when he noticed something different. She didn't shrink back like the others. Her eyes showed genuine concern, not fear or servitude. That was new to him. "What's your name?" he asked, crossing his arms. "Yoon Hana from the design department," she answered, unable to look directly at him. Ji-hoon nodded, memorizing the name. Instead of punishing her, he simply said, "I hope you'll be more careful next time." Without another word, he walked away, leaving Hana with her heart pounding. What she didn't know was that the accidental encounter had imprinted itself on Ji-hoon's mind. Something about her intrigued him, and for a man who had always maintained absolute control over his life, that was unsettling. Later, in his office, Ji-hoon was reviewing reports when a document caught his attention. It was one of the ongoing design projects. To his surprise, Yoon Hana's name was listed as the lead designer. His gaze lingered on the illustrations before him, feeling an inexplicable admiration for the talent of the woman who had spilled coffee on him. "Interesting," he murmured, drumming his fingers on the desk. Curiosity settled in, and Ji-hoon decided he needed to know more about this employee. Fate, it seemed, had other plans for him. The next day, Hana received an unexpected summons for a private meeting with Ji-hoon. What could he possibly want from her? The next morning, Yoon Hana's heart pounded as she spotted an unexpected email in her inbox. The sender? None other than CEO Kang Ji-hoon himself. The subject was straightforward. Private meeting. Report to my office at 10 a.m. Her stomach twisted with anxiety. Was this about the coffee incident? Or even worse, was he going to fire her? With no other choice, she gathered her courage and made her way to the upper floor, a place where few employees were ever allowed to step foot. Inside the luxurious office, Ji-hoon observed her with an impassive expression. His intense gaze made her shift uncomfortably. "Sit down." His voice was firm but not hostile. Hana obeyed, keeping her hands in her lap to conceal her nervousness. Ji-hoon slid a file across the desk toward her. "This is your design project for the new campaign. It caught my attention." Her eyes widened in surprise. "It caught your attention?" Ji-hoon nodded slowly, crossing his arms. "Not just because of its quality, but also because you developed it without sufficient support. Your department underestimates your talent." Hana blinked, at a loss for words. She had never imagined the CEO was paying attention to her work. "I want you to present your proposal personally at the board meeting tomorrow." A jolt of shock ran through Hana's body. Present in front of the executives? She was just an ordinary employee. "Sir, I don't know if I'm the right person for this." Ji-hoon leaned forward slightly. "Are you saying you don't trust your own work?" She swallowed hard. It was a challenge, and he knew it. Taking a deep breath, she finally responded, "I will do my best." Ji-hoon observed her for a moment before giving a faint, satisfied smile. "Good. I'll expect nothing less." As Hana left the office, her mind spun with conflicting emotions. She was grateful for the opportunity, but she was also deeply intrigued. Why was Ji-hoon investing in her? He, on the other hand, watched the door close, feeling a growing curiosity about the employee who dared to be different. The next day, the board meeting turns into a battlefield. As Hana faces unexpected criticism and Ji-hoon finds himself compelled to step in. The board meeting was set to begin in just a few minutes, and Yoon Hana could feel her palms growing sweaty. Her heart pounded as she organized her materials, never having felt so out of her element before. The conference room was intimidating, filled with powerful figures, each one watching her with skepticism. And at the center of the table sat Kang Ji-hoon, the man who had placed her in this position. Ji-hoon looked at her and gave a slight nod, as if silently saying, "You can do this." Taking a deep breath, Hana began her presentation. She explained her vision for the campaign, the innovative concepts, and how they could transform the company's image. She did her best to keep her voice steady, but she could feel the doubtful gazes. Some of the directors whispered among themselves. When she finished, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. Then, the first attack came. Interesting, but far too risky. One of the older directors crossed his arms. And why should we trust this approach from such an inexperienced employee? Hana opened her mouth to respond, but another executive cut her off. Not to mention, she holds no leadership position. Does the CEO really believe this young woman knows what's best for the company? Heat rushed to Hana's face. She had expected resistance, but the blatant distrust was overwhelming. Before she could defend herself, Ji-hoon stepped in. "I do." His voice echoed through the room, cold and commanding. "And if you believe she lacks experience, perhaps you should focus on the content of her presentation before passing judgment." Silence fell over the boardroom. Ji-hoon scanned the room, daring anyone to challenge him. "Her project is the most innovative I've seen in years. If any of you can present a better idea, I'm listening." No one spoke. Hana blinked, stunned. He was defending her. Ji-hoon continued, "I assume you all know the difference between innovation and fear of change. If you prefer the latter, then perhaps we need to reconsider our team." A wave of discomfort spread across the room. None of the directors dared to challenge the CEO's authority. Finally, one of them cleared his throat and spoke. "If you're convinced, sir, we'll give the project a chance." Ji-hoon gave a firm nod before glancing at Hana, who felt an immense sense of relief. She had never expected him to stand up for her like that. As she left the meeting, Hana walked down the hallway, still processing everything. That was when she heard footsteps behind her. "I told you that you could do it." Ji-hoon stopped beside her. She gave a small, shy smile. "I really thought they were going to eat me alive." He let out a soft chuckle, something rare. "You did well, and they know it." For a moment, Ji-hoon's eyes remained locked on hers. There was something different in his gaze, a warmth she hadn't expected. But before either of them could say anything else, a voice rang out across the hallway. "Kang Ji-hoon!" The female voice carried undeniable authority. Ji-hoon closed his eyes briefly before turning around. Hana followed his gaze and saw a well-dressed woman approaching, flanked by two men in suits. It was Kang Soo-min Ji, Hoon's older sister, one of the company's most influential shareholders. And as her gaze landed on Hana, the contempt in her eyes was unmistakable. Ji, Hoon's sister, confronts Hana and makes it clear that she is not welcome. But this is only the beginning of the trouble ahead. Kang Soo-min stopped in front of Hana, her eyes assessing her with cold scrutiny. The executives accompanying her maintained neutral expressions, but the atmosphere was thick with tension. Ji-hoon held his firm posture, though the tight clench of his jaw betrayed his irritation at his sister's presence. "I imagine you must be Yoon Hana." Soo-min's voice was controlled, yet loaded with intent. The young employee who managed to secure an exclusive presentation before the board of directors. A chill ran down Hana's spine. She didn't need to be a genius to recognize the hostility hidden beneath those words. Nevertheless, she slightly inclined her head in respect. "Yes, ma'am. I'm honored by the opportunity the CEO has given me." Soo-min smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. "I hope you understand that this is not a place where people simply rise in rank with ease. Everything here is earned through great sacrifice." Ji-hoon intervened before Hana had to respond. Hana is more than competent enough to be here, Sumin. His voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. Sumin raised an eyebrow and crossed her arms. Is that so? Then perhaps she should prove herself even further. Her gaze fixed on Hana once more. The company's annual gala event is in a week. We need someone to assist with the organization and ensure everything goes perfectly. Since you seem to enjoy challenges, Miss Yoon, you may take on that responsibility. Na's eyes widened. A gala event? With investors, shareholders, and high society elites in attendance? The pressure would be immense. But if she refused, she would only be confirming the doubt Sumin was so obviously planting. I accept. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Ji-hoon frowned but said nothing. Min's satisfied smile deepened. Excellent. I hope you won't disappoint us. With one last glance of superiority, she turned and walked away, followed by the executives. The silence left behind was heavy. Ji-hoon let out a deep sigh, running a hand through his hair. You didn't have to accept. Hana squared her shoulders. And run away right after defending my own abilities in the meeting? That would have been the real mistake. Ji-hoon studied her for a long moment before allowing a small smile to form. Brave, she shrugged, trying to hide her nervousness. But as she left the office, Hana knew she was stepping into a game far bigger than she had ever imagined. The gala event is fast approaching, and Hana faces even greater challenges. But what she doesn't expect is that the night of the party will bring unexpected revelations about Ji-hoon in his past. The night of the gala event had arrived, and Yoon Hana's heart pounded against her chest as she moved through the luxuriously decorated halls. She had spent days organizing every detail, from the invitations to the menu, all under the relentless scrutiny of Kang Sumin. Any mistake would be used against her. Guests mingled throughout the venue, their laughter blending with the soft clinking of champagne glasses. Hana observed everything closely, ensuring that every element was flawless. Ji-hoon, impeccable in his black tuxedo, greeted shareholders and investors with ease. His eyes searched for her among the crowd, and when he finally found her, he offered a barely perceptible smile. But then, what was meant to be a night of celebration quickly turned into a battlefield. I imagine you're quite pleased with your work tonight. Min's sharp voice made Hana turn. But don't be mistaken. Your place here is still temporary. Hana held her composure. I do my job with dedication, ma'am. That's what matters. Min let out a low chuckle and picked up a glass of wine from a passing waiter. You're naive. Don't you realize you're being used? My brother may be entertained for now, but he belongs to a world you will never understand. Before Hana could respond, a tall, well-dressed man approached the central stage. He cleared his throat into the microphone, drawing the attention of the guests. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. Before we toast to the company's success, we have an important announcement to make. A bad feeling settled in Na's stomach. Ji-hoon stepped beside the man, his expression now rigid. The man continued. As you all know, Kang Group has always valued strategic alliances. And to further strengthen our position, we would like to announce the engagement of Kang Ji-hoon to Miss Min Seora, the daughter of President Min. Silence fell over the hall. Hana felt the air leave her lungs. Ji-hoon's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his gaze burning into his sister, who smiled in satisfaction. Hana swallowed hard and turned to leave, but Ji-hoon caught up to her first. Don't believe this. His voice was low, urgent. I never agreed to this engagement. She took a step back, her eyes filled with hurt. But you knew, didn't you? You knew your family would do something like this, and yet you didn't tell me anything. Ji-hoon closed his eyes for a moment before looking at her again. I'll fix this. But before he could say anything more, Min Seora pushed through the crowd, approaching with an air of familiarity as she slipped her hand around Ji-hoon's arm. Appa, it's an honor to finally make our engagement official. Her voice was sweet, but her eyes landed coldly on Hana. Who is she? Ji-hoon hesitated for a brief second, and Hana knew that was her cue to leave. Hana decides to walk away, but Ji-hoon is determined to fight against his family for what he truly feels for her. Yoon Hana walked through the illuminated streets of Seoul, trying to suppress the tightness in her chest. Ji-hoon's engagement was a reality she could no longer ignore, and as much as it hurt, she knew she had to walk away. The pain of disappointment was unbearable, but she refused to be a pawn in a game she could never win. However, before she could go any further, Ji-hoon appeared before her breathless. He must have run a long way to find her. "Hana, please, listen to me." His voice was desperate, his eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. "I never agreed to this engagement. It was all a scheme by my family." Hana crossed her arms, trying to maintain her composure. "But you did nothing to stop it. How can I trust you?" Ji-hoon stepped closer, gently taking her hands in his. "I've spent my entire life obeying my family, following rules I never chose. But ever since I met you, everything changed. You made me see what truly matters. I love you, Hana, and I'm willing to face anything for us to be together." Tears welled up in Hana's eyes. She wanted to believe him, to trust him. And then, as if fate itself was working in their favor, Ji-hoon pulled an envelope from his pocket and opened it before her. "This is my answer." He held up a document. "I just resigned from Kang Group. They can keep the company, but they will never control my life." Hana covered her mouth in shock. He had really done it. He had chosen her over his family's empire. "You did this for me?" Her voice came out as a whisper. Ji-hoon smiled. "I did this for us. I want to build a future with you, free from obligations and expectations that make no sense. Let's start over, together." Na's heart raced, and without hesitating any longer, she threw herself into his arms. The crowd around them faded away, and all that mattered was the warmth of Ji-hoon's embrace. A few months later, in a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends and allies, Hana and Ji-hoon exchanged vows. They had overcome every obstacle, and now they were ready for a future together, forging their own path. Ji-hoon and Hana triumphed over all adversity, proving that true love is stronger than any obstacle. Now, they embark on a new journey together, ready to face the future as husband and wife.